Fe es una idea muy difícil por muchos de nosotros, especialmente en nuestro mundo ahora. Fe es muy difícil porque es difícil para entender fe y es más difícil para vivir nuestra fe. It's so simple for us to speak that I'm a Christian. I believe in Jesus. I'm Catholic. But do our lives proclaim that reality? En nuestro evangelio de hoy fue la proclamación de fe de Pedro. When Jesus asked, "Who do the people say that I am?" What did Peter say? You're the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Y immediatamente después de esto, when Jesus came and told him what was going to happen, he said, I'm going to be persecuted, I'm going to be beaten, battered, bruised, I'm going to be murdered. And after 3 days, I'm going to raise from the dead. What was Peter's response? It's very similar, I think, to our response when things don't go quite how we want them to. He pulls Jesus aside and says, "Look here, Lord. You may think you know best. This is not going to happen." There are times in our lives where we have that same struggle with God. God, who am I that you've chosen for this path in life? Who am I that you chose to be married to this spouse, that you chose to be the child of these parents, that you chose to be the parent of these children, that you chose to be a priest? Who am I that you have chosen me for this mission in life? And so we chastise God the same way that Peter chastised Jesus in today's gospel. And I hate to say it, many times the Lord's response to Peter is the same response that he says to us: "Get behind me, Satan." Because when we aren't seeing with the mind and the eyes of God, we are being led by the desires of the heart and by our passions, and many times by our sins. You know, in our second reading today, we hear from the book of James, one of the most controversial parts of Scripture between Catholics and non-Catholic Christians. Many times it's quoted, "Faith without works is dead." And what does James say to us? Show me a faith without works, and I'll show you my faith by my works. You know, it's easy for us to talk about faith. Es muy difícil para vivir una vida con fe. Con nuestras acciones, no solo con nuestros pensamientos y nuestras palabras, pero con nuestras acciones y nuestras vidas. Es muy importante para vivir nuestra fe. Hay un dicho en inglés: they will know we are Christians by our love. It's pretty much what James is saying in today's second reading. I will show you my faith by how I live it. And yet many times we struggle to live our faith. You know, one of the biggest struggles that I have sometimes as a priest, I think, is very similar to the struggle that many times our adults have as parents. We want our children to listen. We want our children to be disciplined. We want our children to have love. But our children are sometimes disobedient. And they don't always listen. And even when they listen, it goes in one ear and out the other. So too with us, with God, at many times in life. You know, as a priest, it hurts my heart sometimes when we do a lot of things for the church, and we invite and we invite and we invite. And then to see sometimes the apathy that we live our lives by. That it's not that we don't care, it's that we don't even think many times about what is really important. Pero ¿cuál es la más importante cosa en nuestro mundo? Si no es el amor de Dios. Nuestros juegos, nuestros equipos, nuestros trabajos, nuestros televisiones o celulares o ¿cuál es más importante para nuestro mundo? Y si no es el amor de Dios, there's no wonder that we have so many people that are broken and hurting because God's love isn't their foundation. You know, growing up, I hated when priests would preach at me. I didn't understand it because my priest was old, and though I have no hair, I'm not old yet. No soy más viejo, menos que 40 años, gracias a Dios. Para el próximo año, sí. But the priest would always say, "Why aren't you doing this?" And I didn't understand it until I got ordained as a priest. And then I realized that the priest, as the father, as the shepherd, is just as concerned about my soul as my parents are supposed to be. But for many of us, nuestra primera relación con Dios no es con nuestros padres. Es con películas o libros o nuestros abuelos o tías o tíos o padrinos, pero con nuestros padres en nuestro mundo es muy difícil para dar el don de fe. Because many times as a parent, our priority isn't the faith. Well, God will forgive me. If he doesn't, well, he'll just have to understand. You know, many times in life, I am tempted to just put on social media something that's going to push someone's buttons. That's true, that's part of the faith. In fact, yesterday, I fell to that temptation for about 70 seconds before I deleted it off my Facebook page. One of my favorite movies growing up was Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Not the Johnny Depp Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but the Gene Wilder Willy Wonka. And there are these characters in Willy Wonka called Oompa Loompas. Very near and dear to my heart because they're short, fat guys. Very near and dear to my heart. But they would always, when they were dismissing someone from the chocolate factory, sing a song. It would begin, Oompa, Loompa, Doompa, Dee-da. And it would kind of go on, and it would teach a lesson. Well, there was one that someone had shared, that I had shared, and then I thought better of it. Because part of it I loved. But I know that not all the time when we put things out on social media do people get our intent. And in this one it was, who is to blame when your kid is a brat? Now, I don't like that part of it. But who is to blame when your kids aren't disciplined? Who is to blame when your kids aren't doing what they're supposed to do is how I heard it. And I loved the end of it. Whose fault is it? The mother and the father. It's like, ooh, that hits in the heart. Y por nuestros niños menos que la edad para manejar, es la responsabilidad por los padres to bring their children to church. Because if they cannot drive themselves to be here, and they aren't here, Not only are they sinning by missing Mass, but so too are mom and dad by missing Mass. Think about that for a moment. We forget that when you have your children baptized, la promesa primero de los padres is that you as mother and father will be the first and prime educator, la primer maestro en la fe de su niño. Es su promesa de bautismo. Y los padrinos, su responsabilidad es para ayudar a los padres with teaching the faith. Esto es responsabilidad de padres y padrinos. No con las cosas en el mundo. Oh, sí, padre. Los padrinos, su responsabilidad es para pagar para el 15 y bautismo y primera comunión y los dones y dones y dones. ¡No! Su responsabilidad es para ayudar a los padres con la fe de su niño, primero y solo. Otras cosas no importantes. Oh, Padre. Those are fighting words. Porque con nuestra comunidad, con la gente quien habla en español primero, Padre no tiene responsabilidad en la familia. Sí, pero sin la responsabilidad en la iglesia, no me importa. And I know that sounds harsh, and it's not meant to be harsh. But again, if our most important relationship is not with Christ, what are we doing with our lives? When we get married, la responsabilidad de los dos esposas es para cómo? Para ayudar su marido para entrar al cielo. Es primero. To help your spouse get to heaven is the first role of a spouse. Everything else comes with it. The kids that are here, it's good to see you guys, kids. But you are extra to helping your parents get to heaven, and that doesn't mean that you're meant to just be their crosses. Though believe me, children, you are the crosses of your parents, and they love you anyways because they don't have a choice. What did Jesus say in today's gospel? Pick up your cross and follow me. How do we live our faith? It's not just words. It's not just saying things. But it's how we increase the love of God in our lives. Because love, by definition, cannot be held within. It cannot be held captive. It must be shared. So when we are first loved by God, then we are called to go out and love our neighbor as ourselves. We just mess up the priorities. We mess up what's important. Because the world says something else is important. You know, I had multiple people tonight come to me at the 5 o'clock Mass and say, Father, you didn't go to the OU game tonight? I said, no, tengo misa. Pero Padre, it's barely halftime. You're going to miss the OU game. I said, it's going to happen whether I watch it or not. I have no influence on what's going to happen. Oh, but Father, we always have influence on the games we watch. No es verdad, es una mentira. Lo siento. But we put so much importance on things that when we are called home to heaven will not remain. Our jobs, our money, our teams, our sports. They're good things, but if God isn't first, nothing else matters. Entonces mi pregunta por todos de nosotros esta noche es, ¿quién dicen que eres Dios? Who do you say that God is? ¿Su primer amor? ¿Su padre? Your best friend? Who is God to you? I don't want to just hear it. I want to see it in how you live your life. Because if we profess with our lips one thing and we live in a different way, Christ says it time and time again, as does St. Paul in the New Testament, somos hipócritos. We are hypocrites if we say one thing and do something else. So may our words and our faith embrace. And may they embrace in the love of God. Because that is how we live our faith. And how our faith is known by how we love each other. So may we take this evening as an opportunity to receive God's love, para recibir el amor de Dios primeramente en la Eucaristía, para ayudarnos afuera de esta iglesia, en el mundo, quien dicen no hay cosas buenas. If you can't see the miracles out there, how is God calling you to be that miracle? Be the miracle, my brothers and sisters.